Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for attending the latest in a series of webinars from B2W Software. As you can see from the opening page here, today's webinar is on work breakdown structure, or as we say, learn a powerful new way to estimate with WBS. So this is one of the first webinars that we really go in depth on a specific feature. So just to let you know, even though we'll be going to a fair amount of depth on work breakdown structure, because it is focused on a single feature, today's webinar will likely not take up the entire 1 hour. It'll take probably closer to about 40 minutes. These webinars that we put on are intended to help educate our customer base on some of the new features as they come out, as well as make them aware of other solutions that are available in the B2W suite. It's also designed for folks that are maybe looking at software that don't have a solution yet to see what's out on the market and some of the capabilities that we can offer. So I'll start out here with the normal sort of housekeeping stuff. I am Tom Willey. I'm the company's Senior Solutions Engineer. I started with B2W back when it was Bid2Win software back in 2006. And I'll be doing most of the talking and presenting today. I started the company as a trainer and then went on into the implementation team. And then after that, I was made a solutions engineer where I do a lot of the product demonstrations. Riding shotgun with me today, as always, is the indomitable Mr. Hooks. Mark will be monitoring the chat window. So Mark will generally not have a speaking role, but he'll be monitoring the chat window in case any of you folks would like to ask questions during the webinar. So we do encourage that kind of interaction. If you have a question about something that you've seen on screen or the content in general, just ask through the chat window. Mark will kind of moderate that area, and if it's a question that I can answer or would have some benefit to the greater group, he'll send it my way, and I'll do my best to answer it for everyone. If it is a niche question or maybe something that's off topic, or if we do run short on time, then we might take that question offline and answer you directly later on. But we will do our best to answer questions as they come along. As you can see here, Mark has also been with the company quite some time, basically the same time as me. And he's also had a similar path here. He started as a product trainer, just like I did, went on to become an implementer as well, and is now the other solution engineer for the company. So between the two of us, we do pretty much all the product demonstrations for all of B2W. So let's get started. Here's the agenda that we'll be going through today. We'll take just a moment to talk about the overall one platform, that is to say all of the solutions that our company provides, to give a context for where work breakdown structure, or WBS, fits into that. Then we'll actually look at a fair bit of detail at WBS itself. We'll kind of talk about who uses it, what it is, and we'll look at it in the program and all the different ways that it can help make estimating much more efficient. Then we'll save plenty of time, in this case, for questions and answers at the end. We will almost certainly end up ending the webinar a little early just due to the targeted nature of the content. And even though we've saved that area at the end, as I mentioned, please do feel free to ask any questions along the way. And then we'll have a wrap-up. So we'll just have a quick reminder of some of the things that you folks can do after the webinar is finished, and then we'll release you on your merry way. So let's start out. The one platform here, this is a graphic that just kind of describes overall our product offering, or our solutions that are available. So really what we'll be focusing on today is a feature that lives within B2W Estimate. That's our bidding and estimating solution. And in essence, just to kind of put it in context for the rest of the solution offering, once you win an estimate and it becomes a job, you would then push it over into our operations platform. So all of these products, estimate, dispatch, track, and maintain, really make the one platform, or operational networked elements. And so after you win the job, you estimate it using B2W Estimate. Then you can use dispatch to actually schedule resources out there, so it lets you see all your available jobs. You can drag and drop resources onto jobs and see who's available and allocate your resources accordingly. Then with B2W Track, once those assets actually hit the field, you can use Track to record what they did. So the labor hours, the equipment hours, the materials consumed, production quantities, and then you'll be able to see in real time how they're trending on a job compared to the estimate itself, to give you real-time feedback. And then finally, we have B2W Maintain, which is the Equipment Maintenance and Management module. So focusing on things like repair requests, both preventive and break-fix work orders, scheduling it to mechanics, etc. And really, the thing that sets our solutions apart from all the other solutions on the market is that all three of these elements here are one single unified SQL database. So for example, if I add a new piece of equipment into the inventory, then I don't have to add it in 3 separate silos of data. I just add it to the operations platform in one way, and then that piece of equipment can be dispatched, tracked, and maintained all at once. So a very, very powerful and efficient way to manage the operations platform, and all of the information necessary for a job has been set up automatically simply by using Estimate to push that job over. So that's a good overview of the overall solutions, the one platform. Again, we'll really be focusing on Estimate. So I'm going to go now into the next slide here, and we're going to start to talk about work breakdown structure. So what is WBS and who needs it? So the first thing to know is that WBS is a completely new and different way of being able to create, cost, price, and manage your estimates. So it's very, very different from a traditional pay item-based bid, where in a pay item bid, you simply choose the pay items, and it's a flat list of line items that the owner would see. And you can generate them, or the owner can generate them, but in essence, each line is a pay item, and each pay item can have an unlimited number of cost elements inside it, but all the items are peers, and it's just one single level. Inside a work breakdown structure estimate, it's really designed around the concept of being able to cost an estimate the way that you would actually build it out. And so you'll see that you can take a project and carve it up into logical groups called divisions. And you can assign codes to those divisions, and you can create a hierarchy of unlimited depth that really mimics how you would want to build it out. So you take a project, you break it into the logical pieces, and each piece can be broken further and further down, and each piece can have an unlimited number of cost elements inside it. So not only is it different in that respect in terms of how you build it out, but you could also dynamically choose at which one of those levels you want to price the estimate. So you could have a lump sum, you could price at the division level, or even lower. And that's really when we get into this second bullet here, where we talk about some WBS terminology. So as I mentioned, you could break out a project into divisions, and then any given division can be further subdivided into what we call subdivisions. And you can continue on that path with each further breakout getting its own code, where you could break down into subdivisions and sub-subdivisions and sub-sub-subdivisions, all the way down until you get to something called a terminal level. And the terminal level is actually where you place your costs. And anything that is not a terminal level cannot have costs in it. It only consists of either further subdivisions or it's a terminal level. So I'll show you all of these things in more detail. A couple of technical points about the WBS functionality. First of all, it's only available in the Enterprise edition of Estimate. So if any of you folks are running our basic or our professional version, and then you go back to your desks, you won't see the functionality there. It is only an Enterprise. So it's meant to only for the largest companies or the companies that have some of the most complex requirements. It's right up there with other powerful features like audit trail, like view item history, management reporting. So it's all part of the Enterprise package. So the other piece of functionality to keep in mind is that work breakdown structure was released in the 2013.2 edition of B2W Estimate Enterprise. So even if you have the Enterprise edition, if you have a version that is earlier than 2013.2, you won't see it there as well because you'll need to update. So if you see stuff in here that's useful and you have an older edition, certainly might be time to update and get that functionality. The third thing to know about work breakdown structure is that it is by default turned off in the software. So even if you have the latest edition and you're running Enterprise, unless you've specifically turned it on, you won't see it right away. And the reason that we did that is kind of along the lines of this slide, who needs it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if you don't need work breakdown structure, a lot of our clients felt that it might be distracting to update to a new version and then see this different area to deal with. So it's a very simple method to just turn it on in the administration tool. But in this way, for any folks that don't need it, it doesn't show up on screen. So you need 2013.2 or later, the Enterprise Edition, and then simply enable it using the administration tool. So a little bit more of a WBS overview in terms of the concept itself. This is really a good visual depiction of how WBS is designed to work. So at the top level here, you have the project, and that represents the complete sum of all things you're trying to do within the estimate. And really the guts of the concept of WBS is that you can break this out into as much detail as you want, and every division and subdivision, everything underneath it represents 100% of the level above it. So when you get all the way to the hospital complex, everything in your WBS should represent 100% of the work necessary to do that project. And I can break it down into this first level or division, and you'll see this is where we talk about those codes. You have this hierarchical set of codes. So in this case, I've broken it out into Division 2, site construction, and Division 3, concrete. And then I can further subdivide that. So Division 2 can be broken out into O2-300 and O2-500, earthwork and utilities. And then I can further break that down. Earthwork gets broken into O2-310, grading, and O2-315, excavation and fill, and so on and so on. Now in this particular case, I've made everything here terminal level. So what that means is, you'll see this in the software, this is the level at which I would actually put costs. So in the software, if I looked at O2-310 grading, this is where I would place crews and maybe materials or subcontractors or whatever it might be. But when I do that, when I put costs into a level, it becomes a terminal level, and I cannot further subdivide it. So if it's not a terminal level, then it can only consist of further subdivisions. So O2-300 is a subdivision, and it is not a terminal element because it breaks down into other levels. If I were to put cost into it, then I would not be able to do that because it already has additional levels. If I were to, say, just make that level and then put cost into it, I would not be able to further break it down. In fact, this is a structure that you're going to see here. I'm kind of borrowing one of the most common work breakdown structure systems there are, so we'll see more about it. But that's a good visual depiction of how WBS works. What I'll do now is kind of move on to the who needs it. So what you're looking at here is a list of kind of our traditional customer base all the way back to our roots, starting over here with asphalt paving. The CEO of our company, Paul McKeon, he was an asphalt paver and decided there had to be a better way and built the first version of bid to win, or power bid as it was back then. But since then, we've continued to grow and expand the capabilities of our software, expand our solutions offering, and now we cover a very wide array of work types, bridge contractors, concrete, demolition, offshore diving, drilling, water, heavy electrical. But with the addition of work breakdown structure, it's even expanded way beyond that. So the capabilities of work breakdown structure are really needed by some of the largest customers, both in terms of customers that do our traditional work types, because just the size and scope of the projects that they work on require that kind of rigid breakdown that WBS offers. But it also means that companies outside of these work types, so even vertical contractors or super large ones that do entire city infrastructures, they can now use the software as well because it provides the framework that they need to truly cost out their estimates. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is exit out of the PowerPoint here, and we'll move on to the actual software itself. So I'm inside of B2W Estimate right now, and the first thing I want to point out is that right off the bat, you don't see work breakdown structure anywhere. And that's because I'm logged in as a user that doesn't have WBS permissions. So as we talked about, I have the latest edition of the software that's released. I am running the Enterprise Edition. It's simply not enabled. And we did that to make sure that it didn't confuse any folks that don't specifically need and want that functionality. However, I'm going to log out and log back in as a different user. And I'm going to log in as someone who has permissions to use work breakdown structure. So now when I log in here, brings me to the other monitor there. Now you'll see that item databases is now item and WBS databases, both up here at the top as well as the administration area. So it's been enabled, and I have access to WBS estimates as well. So I'm going to go into that area. This is where you'll see a good comparison of the two methods. So starting out up here, this is the other method, or pay item-based estimates, where everything here is really just a flat list of items. So I can have an unlimited number of items, but this is really the level that I have to price at. I can have as many of these as I want, but they're all peers. It's a flat list. And each one of these items can have an unlimited level of cost underneath. But I really need to choose the way that I want to price my estimate and build my line items around that accordingly. So by contrast, down here, you're going to see the work breakdown structure databases. And as I mentioned, for examples, I'm using one of the most common, really nigh ubiquitous work breakdown structure systems, the CSI MasterFormat. So that's from the Construction Specifications Institute, and there's a 16-division breakdown that's very common among folks that do WBS. There is also a 50-division version that they're pushing quite aggressively. Most folks are still using 16-division. So just as an example, I'm going to go into that WBS database, and what you'll see is that at first glance, it kind of looks like items. You have this list, but notice there are plus signs. So I can have an unlimited number of divisions, and each division can be further broken out into subdivisions. So if I look at my O2 site construction, you'll see I have it broken out into O2 050, O2 100, O2 300, etc., and I can further and further break things down. So what I'm doing here is very similar to item databases, is I'm building out my work breakdown structure with any and all pre-associated costs that I want. So whenever I go to create a WBS estimate, I'll be able to pull any of the divisions or subdivisions or terminal levels, and they'll come into the estimate with any of these costs. Okay, so right here, O2312 is a terminal level. I can't further break that down. I can only put costs into it because there's costs present. So some additional new functionality that's available in work breakdown structure that is not available at the pay item level is the ability to do something called summation. So I'm going to go inside of, say, my excavation division here. You'll see it's O2315 broken down into 1 through 5. And if I go into the Detail tab, as part of setting this up, I can actually tell the system that I want the quantity at the top level to be a summation of the child components underneath. So in other words, excavation and fill O2315 is a subdivision that consists of these terminal levels, O2315.1, 2, 3, and .4 and .5. I could simply say, add up all the quantities underneath. So by entering the quantities here, you'll see if I change that to 3,500, that the top quantity now changes to 14.5. The system, when you set it for summation, will automatically add any like units of measure underneath, and you can choose if you want something to not contribute to that summation. So I might have maybe another further subdivision within here that, or a terminal level, I should say, something like maybe disposal fees. And it is by the cubic yard, but it shouldn't contribute to the overall quantity. I could simply right-click and say to exclude it from summation. But it means that my WBS levels are now quite a bit more in sync. So I can create these levels. To create a level, it's very simple. I would just go to any division. I'm just going to go into division 16. I'll expand out to 16100, and I'll go into, say, cable and raceways here, and I'll create a new terminal level in there with some costs. Now, I just happen to know that if I create a new level here, I'm going to create 16132, and the description for that is conduit and tubing, kind of borrowing from the CSI MasterFormat. I could make it any unit of measure that I want. I'll say linear feet. And you'll see now I have that terminal level there, and I can simply add costs into it whenever I wish. So I'm now going to go add costs. The same cost components dialog box comes up as I would use in items, using the same resources. And I would just go and find the crew that I want, conduit crew, and then maybe a material as well. I'll just say, for demonstration purposes here, some conduits, some schedule 82-inch. So there, I've created a new WBS level. From now on, whenever I need that in an estimate, I can just grab it and go. Some other capabilities that we've added are the ability to import an entire WBS database. So feedback from our clients was not only do we have these common industry-wide work breakdown structures, but that some owners are actually so large, they have their own owner-specific WBS, and when you bid to them, you need to use that. So we've given you the ability to create an unlimited number of WBS databases with an unlimited number of different separate structures. But I can also import it. So if they send it to me in Excel, I can just bring it in. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say I want to import a WBS database. It's going to walk me through a little wizard here. And it's going to ask for the import file. So I'm going to see here, I've got a new customer, WBS. I could import it to an existing database, so I could actually use that to update or add more WBS levels to an existing database. Or how could I create it on a different database? I'm sorry, it looks like there's a question just came in here. Looking at the WBS detail screen, how do I visually tell if an item is or is not included in summation? That's a good question. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think there might actually be a column for that. But you would be able to right-click on it and say to remove it from the summation. I don't think, Mark, you can chime in on the screen as well if there is one. I'll have to double-check here in a moment. I'll kind of go back once I'm done importing this, and we'll see. Or, Mark, if you could check on your side. I don't think there is an indication on screen. We'll come back to that in just a minute. In the meantime, though, what I'll do is I'll finish this import. Rather than importing to an existing division, what I'm going to do is actually wipe it out and say that the customer that gave me the new database is perhaps General Dynamics, a large customer, and I want to import the file to that database. So it's going to let me finish accessing the files, and I'll see here 35 WBS records were created. So it's an entirely new WBS database. I close out of there. When I click on General Dynamics, I'll see that inside it's a completely different coding structure. I kind of borrowed some of the same descriptions. And I can even update levels, so I can have levels within levels. I can create that parent-child dependency. And if I so chose, I could even have resources populate inside these as part of the import process. So a lot of flexibility to have your own WBS structure or an owner's WBS structure, or again, a common one like CSI. So that's the setup and database area, conceptually similar to pay items in that you make them and add your costs. Now what we're going to see is actually creating an estimate. So I'm going to go back to the home page here, and there's really two different types of WBS-related estimates. And I'll show you both of them. Starting out here, I'm going to create a new estimate. It's going to walk me through a little wizard, come up with a title for this. So I'm going to say this is a New Holland project. I can choose a customer from my database. And then you'll see underneath, I now have three options for creating an estimate. I have a traditional pay item-based estimate. I have a WBS-only estimate. But then I also have one here called pay item and WBS. And this is essentially unique on the marketplace. What this allows us to do is, again, based on the feedback from our clients, a lot of folks that use work breakdown structure always use WBS to determine their cost. That's how they think about cost. That's how they build the project. So that's how they build the estimate. But there are times when the owner wants to see the pay items broken out in a way that is specific to their needs. And that might have no bearing whatsoever on your work breakdown structure. So I would be able to see here, when I create an estimate like this, I would be able to cost using my WBS and have the owner's items, and then I'll be able to apportion work breakdown structure costs into the pay items as the owner sees fit. And Mark just did some research for me. And first of all, there is a green counter here, so I'm going to cancel out for a moment, go back and answer that question fully. Inside of the WBS section here, first and foremost, if I go into that site construction, go into earthwork and excavation, there is a green notch up here to indicate that the summation is taking place. And then I can actually add a column here and add exclude from summation. So in the database here, I would be able to see if a given thing is excluded from summation or not. Thanks, Mark. It's always good to have backup. So I'll continue on creating that estimate. I'm going to go through the process, show you the New Hollander project here. Now that name that I enter is in essence going to be the first level or the entire project name for the WBS structure, and you'll see that. Choose a customer from the database. And then I'm going to say work breakdown structure bid. I'll walk through all the normal defaults. And then when I click Finish, now I'm inside a WBS estimate. So you'll see the listing tab here is now a WBS listing and WBS pricing. So if I were to go to the listing tab, this is where it shows me the project itself. And I would generally have this be a one lump sum. Okay, but if it was a pipeline project, I might have a spread and a number of linear feet and break out everything underneath it so you can have different units of measure. It's up to you. Now from here, if I wanted to, I could actually create this estimate in a number of different ways. So just like you can do with pay item-based bids, you can import WBS levels from an Excel spreadsheet. So if your owners provide you a list of WBSs, you could put it into our import format and just bring it in electronically. Or if I wanted to, I could also just go in and manually add the WBS levels that I want. So I would click on the Add WBS Levels, and it would show me all my different WBS databases, and I'd simply be able to choose what I want to add to the estimate. Now I can do this in a number of ways too. I could start at the top and kind of choose which divisions I want to have, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. Or if I wanted to, I could actually choose individual pieces at the bottom. So for example, I might know that I want summary of work. I would choose that. But watch what happens here. If I deselect number 1, so there's nothing really in Division 1 that's selected, if I choose a terminal level, the system is smart enough to automatically add the parents necessary as well. So I can very easily go through and just grab what I need, and the system will get me the correct levels to support that. I can also do things like, let's say I wanted all of site demolition. I could actually go in and just right-click on that and say select all child levels, and it will select everything for me, as well as the parents up above. So very quick and simple for me to get the things that I need. So I'll just add a few things. I'll add the excavation and fill. Maybe I'll get everything except for compaction, whatever. So once I've got my WBS levels, I can then add them to the estimate. It's now copying them in. And I would go through a similar procedure as I do in a pay item estimate. I would fill out any of my quantities. So as per normal, on the left-hand side here, I just click on whatever I want to get more information about and expand it out to whatever level I need. So if I want to start filling out site preparation, I can even expand here on the right-hand side. And I could say, well, that's going to be 25,000 cubic yards, and maybe the same for minor site demolition. Then I go down to my earthwork. This is, again, where I have that summation. So all I have to do is fill in the quantities underneath, and then it will add up the quantities at the top. Fill out my quantities here, and I'm good to go. So a couple of other things that are pertinent to this area. First of all, you get all the same freebies that you're accustomed to in terms of things like global edits and selective printing. So if I wanted to do a global edit, I could right-click, do the edit cost detail, and now it's bringing up the global edits window, but only for things, components, terminal levels that live within site construction. Only the Division 2 stuff. I wouldn't be modifying anything anywhere else in the estimate. Other things that I can do are, again, the selective printing. So if I wanted to just print for one particular division, I could right-click on that division and then do print. And any of the normal reports that I could run here, cost detail, if I did that, it would just show the things within Division 2, none of the other divisions. So I've got Division 1, Division 2, and all the subdivisions underneath. So I've got 4 subdivisions and a number of terminal levels. I could continue on from here. Really, in terms of markup, it's not that different. Where it starts to get different is when you choose your WBS pricing. So, for example, I go to WBS pricing here, strategy. I can determine my markup, so all the same rules apply. I could put in my overhead. I could put in my profit, bid level taxes, etc. Then when I get to distribution strategy, you're going to see a number of things. So this is where you start to see what level have I chosen to price my estimate at. The default is just to give you a lump sum. So if I go to distribute my profit and say I want to do it proportionally by WBS level, I'll see right off the bat it's just the New Holland project. So there's not a lot of point in distributing it that way. And likewise, I would go to the WBS pricing, and it would show me the single lump sum. I would hit my auto distribution, and it would show my price. And then when I go to the bid form here and do a preview, you'd see the custom logo, the owner information, and it would simply be one lump sum for $555,000. But this is, again, one of the strengths of work breakdown structure, is if you have that kind of flexible need where, yeah, I might have to give them a lump sum, but then I might also need to break it out to other levels. In WBS, you can just say, go further down the chain and break out the different components underneath. Now, if I were in a pay item-based bid, I would have to re-engineer all the pay items around the new things that I wanted to price. So I go back here and just say, I'm going to change the estimate options, and I'm going to change the estimate properties here in bid pricing, and you'll see we have a specific place for WBS pricing settings. So if I say project, it's the lump sum. If I then want to break it out and just do division, then I'd be able to see now on the bid pricing strategy, there are my two divisions, Division 1 and Division 2. I would have to auto-distribute again only because the system makes no assumptions about how you'd want to reapportion those prices. But I get my new prices, and then if I go to the bid form, now those two divisions are what the owner would see. Likewise, at any time, I could continue on down the chain. So I might say, well, they want to get really detailed. I go back into the options and say, show them at the subdivision level, or even all the way down to the terminal level. I do my auto distribution, and you'll see my prices automatically recalculate for those 4 subdivisions. And you guessed it, that is now what will show on the bid form. So some other freebies that you get that are just kind of part of the technology stack, the things we've built. Not only do I get that selective print and global edits that you saw back on the detail tab, but when I'm pricing or when I just want to kind of look back over the history, just like you have view item history, you also have view WBS history. So if I want to look at all the other times I've worked on 02300 earthwork, I can simply right-click and say I want to view the WBS level history. And that will show me any other estimate that I have bid 02300 in, which show me the price, the estimate name, all the pertinent information there. And if I like the looks of something, I could click on it, and I would even be able to get a preview as to what was inside that other estimate. And then from here, I could even open that estimate and copy things out of the old bid and into the new. So that's a pretty good overview of creating, modifying, and marking up a WBS-based estimate. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to the home page here, and we'll look at that concept of a hybrid estimate. So you'll see here I have a WBS pay item hybrid example. I'm going to go into that estimate. And now if I go to the Detail tab, you'll see that we simultaneously have 2 different structures here. These are the pay items that the owner wants to see, and that's how the estimate will be produced when it's finished. But underneath that is my work breakdown structure. So I can completely design and build and cost out the estimate using my WBS structure, and then I can take the costs from this WBS and apportion them into any pay items that the owner has designated I have to do. So this is a kind of simplistic example, but in my example, the owner has said, I want you to bid 3 pay items, 10, 20, and 25A, demolish existing primary structure and prepare surface for new, and then demolish secondary structure and prepare surface for new, and then pour foundations for new structures. So that's how the owner wants me to list it out. Destroy building 1, destroy building 2, and then make me a spot for a new building. And that's great. But the way I do my estimates, I always think in terms of how I'm going to build it. What work breakdown structures am I going to do? So in my world, there's the general requirements, the site construction, and the concrete, and I could have 10, 12 divisions. It doesn't matter. But I could build it out completely the way I want, and then when I'm ready, I simply go to the terminal level, and I would say that I want to apportion these costs into that pay item. So if I go to my finished grading, I would be able to apportion that grading to these items. And you'll see in this case, what I did is took 02311 finished grading, and I apportioned it to the two items. Generally speaking, first I'd probably do the demolition. So if I go back to site prep, the site demolition here, building demolition, I'd see here that I've apportioned that 65-35. So I've said, here's all the different tasks that I'm going to do to demolish it. Take that terminal level and push 65% of the cost into item 10 and 35 into item 20. And the net result of that is building these items up here that the owner cares about. So if I now look for 02221, building demolition, I can see that it's one of the many WBS structures that have been apportioned cost-wise in. And if I look at this pay item here and look for 02221, building demolition, I'll see it's a portion of the quantity and a portion of the cost. And now this item consists of any and all WBS structures that I push to it. So now when I go to print out the bid form for the owner, all of my costs that I designated have been pushed into the items, and I can price out the items to designate whatever I need. So it's a very, very flexible way of being able to simultaneously cost out an estimate the way you want and present the items the way the owner needs to see. The other thing that I'll show you in terms of the work breakdown structure is one final feature, which is the ability to also attach tags to work breakdown structures. So for example, if I look at down here in WBS, yeah, I have to take my costs and I have to push them into the items, but I might need to use other mechanisms to group together and filter and look at costs across the estimate. So I'm going to go into excavation and fill here, all the way down to 02315.4, and you'll see any of these terminal levels here would have a tag available to them. So tags are user-definable properties. There's actually going to be another webinar on tags by themselves, but it's the ability to create your own user-defined criteria in the system and then apply them however you want. So I could actually do things like make a location tag, and I might say, well, yeah, I have to create these different WBSs for my excavation, but I also want to be able to designate which locations in this job and what portion of the excavation will occur in each location. So I can add the tag values. In this case, the tag is location, and I said within the location tag, there are 3 locations, Brompton Hills, Halsted Center, and Studio Lane. So I'm going to say the excavation is going to occur in 2 of those 3. And I'm going to, again, designate a percentage. So I'll say 50% of the excavation occurs in Halsted, 50% in Brompton Hills. And I could do that for any of the others. I'll go to borrow. You'll see I've already designated it here. I could also designate multiple tags. So I could say, well, 35% is in Brompton Hills, Halsted, and Studio, etc. But then I might also say by year. I might say, well, some of the excavation occurs in 2014 and some in 2015. So I can apply an unlimited number of these tags, and then when I'm ready, I could go to, say, the listing tab, and I could choose to strip away all the information except for the cost components themselves, which in this case would be the apportioned WBS structure. So now this is all of my cost, regardless of WBS, regardless of item, and I could now group it together. I could group it by tag. And I could say, well, just show me by location how much work is going to be done. And I'd be able to see any of the WBS structures that have been apportioned to Brompton Hills or Halsted Center or Studio Lane. So a much more flexible way of me being able to slice and dice the quantities and costs throughout my estimate by virtually anything that I would want to attach to a given structure. So that's pretty much everything that I had planned to show. Looks like we haven't had any other questions come in. At this stage of the game, I'm going to, oh, just as I say that, a question comes in. Can you print the estimate by work breakdown structure? Is there a detailed cost by man-hours printout template that we can use WBS as the breakdown in lieu of pay items? In a WBS-only bid, yes, there is. So if I go to the New Holland project, for example, you'll see that when I go into the printer icon, I actually have work breakdown structure-based estimates down here. So there's a WBS summary. There's a, the cost detail itself now is based on the WBS. So if I do cost detail, there's all the different WBS levels. So all the same reports are available, they're just optimized for a WBS instead of a pay item. For hybrid bids, they are currently based off of the apportioned values in the pay items. However, that's something that we're going to change. So there will be additional reports added to the program in a future release that will let you isolate just WBS-based information, even if you're in a hybrid bid. So great question. At this stage of the game, we are pretty much at the questions section. So I'm going to leave the line open here for additional questions. While folks are thinking of any questions, just as a quick reminder, if you saw anything in this presentation that you liked and wanted to know more about, you could feel free to contact the sales department. If you, say, have the professional edition and were interested in going into the enterprise edition, you could get a full demonstration of all of the different enterprise-based features. And if you're an existing client that already has enterprise and has the latest edition, if you have questions on functionality, like how do I turn it on, how do I create a WBS bid, don't forget you can always call our user support line 24/7, and they'll be glad to give you any information and guide you through the process on how to use that capability. Or if you want to get a very thorough understanding of the work breakdown structure in your environment, you could, of course, get additional training. We could have a trainer come out on site, or we could do online trainings to walk through the functionality specific to your company. Thanks again, everyone, for attending this webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I'll leave the line open for just a little bit longer, but I would also like to remind folks that there will be another webinar coming up soon on that tag functionality, or the use of tags inside of our program. So thanks again for attending the webinar, and if you have any other questions, feel free to send them to us either as an email or contact any one of us directly. Thanks very much, and have a great day.